Hi everyone, Kayleen West here, and today we're talking about glazing versus waxing. And it's a huge topic. My intention is to cover a broad part of that so that it clarifies a few areas and, how we use it, just so you kind of know the differences and where it applies, because they both do a similar thing in a lot of ways sometimes, but they are very different. That's where we're going into, and I'll be as thorough as I can in this time. But I also have written a related article on my blog at kayleenwest.com.au in relation to beeswax, and there's been a recent recall of beeswax from a major hardware chain in Australia, Bunnings. And they've pulled this wax off their shelf, thank you Bunnings, because in fact it wasn't beeswax. That was brought to their attention by another authority. So I've written a concern about that because it's associated to the bee industry and which extends to a lot of areas, and it's a concern on our ports, what's coming into our country and what we're being sold. The products we're being told are something and they're in fact something completely different, and what that means. And I think there needs to be a voice out there saying, please deal with that for us, protect us as consumers. But in saying that, it's a huge industry, the furniture painting industry, and there's a lot of products out there. So I'm going to try and generalize as much as I can when I'm speaking about waxes and glazes and applications, but they do vary. So keep that in mind, that you really need to know the brand. And my biggest thing is know what's in it, know the ingredients. If you understand ingredients and how they react, then you have a better understanding on how to use it. You better understanding on open time and timing and absorption and drying and all the rest of it. So you really do need to have that kind of understanding to be able to really fly with these products. Otherwise, you are relying on what the manufacturer is telling you that it does, and then you need to test it from there and see if in fact it does do that, or in the case of what I wrote on the article, in fact that you're really getting what is in that product. So waxes come in all different hardnesses, and there's liquid wax, and again the ingredients in the wax. So wax is fairly hard to start with. Usually beeswax is quite hard, and so to apply it, something needs to be added usually to soften it, whether that be an oil or whether it be a solvent or other ingredient. When you buy waxes, my recommendation is to buy as natural as possible. I work in my home, in my studio is in my home, my workshop is in my home, amongst my family. It affects my health, their health, and my puppy's health. So I'm very conscious of eco-friendly solvents and harmful chemicals and so forth. So wherever possible, I choose in that direction. There are brands out there that do adopt that and have good ingredients in their products. But with most natural waxes, if they don't put a solvent in, the drying time is longer. So it takes longer for the wax to cure and harden. So there's a trade-off. If you're in a hurry, you can use chemicals and, speed up the process and whip it out. But those chemicals are in the furniture and breathe out of the furniture and so forth. So that's what you need to decide. They come in clear, they come in different colours. There is black waxes, there's dark umber waxes, which is usually used for antiquing. There's white wax for to get a whitewashed or beachy look to your work. There's liquid waxes and there's hard polished waxes. There's wax from Essentials that's got hemp oil in it, so it's combined with hemp oil. There's metallic waxes which give you that shimmery look and just add a bit of glitter to, or it just depends on, again, the brand, how much glitter or shimmer is in it. And there's like pearl waxes, which is kind of similar, but like a mother of pearl kind of shimmery finish. Now, the waxes in general, I mean, basically they're applied and then buffed off. So the excess is buffed off. And so the drying time and the time that you need to buff and the amount of buffing all varies. So there's decision in that area where if you want to shine, so you're going to buff more. If the wax takes longer to tack, you need to hold off for the buffing, otherwise it'll grab. And always use a lint-free cloth, or if you prefer to use wax brushes. Some are easier to apply with brushes and some rags. I usually use brushes in intricate details in the waxes I use. The waxes I use are fairly soft and I prefer it that way. I find it's very hard on my hands. If I use a harder wax, which I've found in the past has really hurt my hands, so I do tend to err on the side of soft waxes and wait for the drying time. I mean, I do use one wax that's quite smelly because it dries fairly quick, but only kind of in emergency situations where I really do have to get that done quickly. So I do prefer to use really nice smelling and nice natural ones. So there's all different waxes. The metallic ones are used just to add that shimmer across, and they're transparent. All the waxes are transparent to a degree, and some have more pigment in them than others. So depending on the strength of pigment you want, you may find there's plenty in a pre-coloured wax, or there may not be enough and you need to add more colour, which you can do usually by a compatible paint to add more colour or a compatible pigment of some sort. The wax finish is generally, it does harden. It's used a lot now with all the furniture makeovers that we do now, because we appreciate that old touch, you know, the feel of wax, the look of wax. But it is wise to, down the track, give your furniture another nice coat of clear wax or something to keep finish nice. The advantages of wax surfaces is often that if you scratch accidentally, you know, light scratches can be easily buffed out and that, whereas like a varnish surface or something a bit harder, once those gouges are in there, you know, and it's highly unlikely you're going to be re-varnishing something. So to touch up areas is more tricky. There's advantages both and disadvantages in either way. So the waxes are beautiful. I personally love the waxes, but I'm a little bit cautious in different situations. I don't think they're as hard a wearing in some situations as perhaps a good glaze or a good sealer. Some glazes need to be sealed and some are pretty much a sealer in themselves. Now a glaze again is like a transparent finish. So it's not opaque. Opaque is when it completely covers the surface. So to a degree it'll be transparent. Now depending on your product, depends on how transparent it is. So some products will be more transparent than others. I love using glazes. Some are definitely more tricky to use than others, as some of them grab the surface, absorb, and are quite matte in their finish, and others have more open time and you're able to move them more and have more of a breather space to be able to move it around and even up your surface before it dries, and some of them dry quite glossy or you know, kind of seal it at the same time. They do again come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, you know, to what you've got to do. I'll give you for instance, I've used the Rust-Oleum Glazes, and they create a really great effect, but they suck in really quick. So if you're doing a really big area, which I've used them for, like tabletop, sometimes I've had to do it 2 or 3 times because it's like to do a certain effect on it. It's really takes you've got to move fast. It's like riding a racehorse, and they grip and pull in really quickly, especially if you're using a chalk paint or something similar. Glazes are used very similar to the coloured waxes, you know, the black wax and the umber waxes. They're usually used to tint or go into the grooves of some details in your white back, and you give it that antique look, or that grubby inside the carving look. I love both waxes and glazes, but there is certain things that I tend to lean towards the glazes than the waxes. You know, the metallics can kind of cover a bit more, a bit quicker. So if you've got something you want evidently gold, but have a transparency to it, I tend to lean towards using the glazes rather than a metallic wax. The metallic waxes to me are very, very subtle. So if I want something that's obvious, I'll go for that. But I don't, something that I don't want gold paint on. I want to create a transparency for a certain reason. There's the product I use called Propel Shimmer Topcoat, but it is pretty much like a glaze, and you can see the colour under it to a certain degree, and it gives you a nice mother of pearl look. But I find that's really nice. It seals at the same time, and it's it's a water repellent seal, dries pretty quickly. Can you see how it's not as easy to explain? It does take a bit of experience to get your head around these, but they are worth it, because your furniture completely transforms with those finishes. Becomes from a very plain piece into quite a substantial piece when you get to know these things. And I'll be teaching on this further in too, more thoroughly, and mentoring people a bit later on. But I really wanted to be able to open up this knowledge to everyone, so that you can get a head start on it. The metallic can be added to if you want more metallic in either of them. You can buy mica gold powder, or there's some really fine metallic powders that you can add to if you want to bump it up. So you can adjust these things to your liking and play with them. If you buy a product and you're not quite happy with it, try and work out why. And if it's just there's not enough pigment or something in it, don't throw it out or give up. You might just have to adjust it and still be able to use it. And you might find you'll actually end up buying it again, because that way you can't get it elsewhere, and that fits you perfectly. So now the drying time, like I said before, the solvents are put into a lot of products to make them dry quickly, to make it convenient. But if you're trying to avoid solvents, you've got to lean towards the things that dry fairly quick but aren't using really bad stuff. In general, the waxes I use, and most waxes, I would say a month, 30 days to cure a wax prop, get it hard. If it's quite strong solvent base, it will dry, fairly hard quicker. But any wax surface, if you were to put a glass of water and the water was sitting on it or something like that, you are risking getting, a white mark or something on it, which may come out, it may dry out, but it may not. So you really do need to give waxes a good drying time, whereas glazes dry a whole lot quicker. And even to touch, they dry a whole lot quicker. And the glazes I use are pretty much hardened in about 7 days. Okay, so that is an advantage of the glazes. The sealing part of it, like the more modern seal on it, and the drying time, the glazes have that advantage. They do sometimes look very similar to get certain effects. Yeah, they do sometimes look similar. So it is a bit of a navigation thing to work out what one to use, but that comes with trial and error and experience. Now, I had a couple of other questions on my page, and Amanda asked, do you apply both together and which comes first? Now, in general, you don't apply them together. However, there are products that I use that you can, kind of, depending on what you use for a glaze. So remember, a glaze is a transparent liquid that's got pigment in it. So that liquid could be anything, and glazes can be made out of a lot of different bases. So if I'm using a glaze that I've made out of, say, hemp oil or a a carrier of some sort, I may be able to mix it in with certain waxes that I use together and let it dry together. They generally don't like, if you've waxed the surface, you don't generally go over top of it. Sometimes you can go the other way though. A wax, you can finish off waxing on the top, but in general, wax comes last because wax will tend to repel other things on top of it. One of my videos I did when I was doing bedside drawers, I was using, I think, liquid wax and hemp oil, but I knew there was the oils in the wax. So when I was doing it at the same time, I knew they would blend and dry okay. So they weren't done separately, but they're kind of done together and they met up. So that was fine. But in general, if you wanted a very basic rule of thumb, I wouldn't mix it unless they're the same ingredients. Again, you've got to know the ingredients and go, well, if that's got that ingredient and that other ingredients in that is not going to fight against what's in that, I should be right. So I hope that explained it. And Darwin asked about metallic waxes, which I've briefly gone over, and top coat over. Do you top coat over? So yes, not over the waxes, unless it's a wax-based top coat that's deliberately meant for that, which there are those out there. But in general, no, the wax goes on last, and the top coat, the glazes, like the Rust-Oleum, I would always seal that. But the Botanics glazes that I use don't really need to be sealed. They are a kind of sealer in and of themselves. There may be others out there too. These are the ones I'm really familiar with. Although, I mean, I'm pretty sure that anti-slones you're able to paint over. So that makes me think you should be able to, if you can paint over it, you should be able to add water-based substances over top. But I don't know if I'd be that confident in doing that. In general, with waxes, I get, if it's something like anti-slone or something that's got maybe a solvent in that, I will use methylated spirits and wipe the wax off and clean the wax off before I would paint again, to make sure of adhesion. Some of the products can be interchangeable with some companies, which is an advantage if you're using a lot of products that are interchangeable. It speeds up the process and gives you more confidence moving around between them. They're really, really worth using. And if you have a look through all the works I've done, I've done hundreds of pieces of furniture. And I think pretty much most of the ones that most beautiful have all got applications of glazing and waxing and all these different finishes on them. So they're really worth playing with and experimenting. And some of my favourite finishes that, I've found and stumbled upon my own have been through experimenting with these things. And it's a way of getting a bit of an individual look to your furniture too. Or crafts, or whatever you're using these for. This doesn't just apply for furniture. So there you go. I hope that was helpful. Have a look at that article on my blog. If you're watching this on my page, please just go up to the top of my page and select follow all posts, or make sure you get these. You can subscribe by messaging me on my page. I've got an automated bot that will let you know when I go live. Don't necessarily let you know when there's a video. And I do have a YouTube channel too, where I edit a lot of stuff and put it over there bit by bit. But basically Facebook gets my attention first, and then it moves over there eventually as time permits. But I hope that has helped you. If there is any more questions, wherever this is posted, leave a comment and I'll see if I can help any further. Like I said, I don't know everything about every product out there, but I have tried a lot, and most with success. But there have been reasons why I've steered away from some and not the others. And obviously, like I wrote on my blog, I won't support products that aren't doing the right, or companies that aren't doing the right thing. So there you go. The door's knocking and I have to get off. Bye.